Okay, this is an interview with Melvin Brenner, I'm sorry, I have a friend, Brennan.
Okay.
I knew I was going to do that. Brenner, Freeport Armory, Freeport, Long Island. It's August 9th, 2002. My name is Michael Russert, the interviewer. It's approximately 2 o'clock. Would you tell us your full name, your date of birth and place of birth, please?
Melvin Brenner, Melvin Charles Brenner. I was born in the Bronx, New York on August 26, 1925.
Okay. What was your educational experience prior to World War II?
Prior to the war,
yes.
I was graduated from high school.
Okay. What year did you graduate?
June of '43.
Okay. And were you did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
You enlisted?
Yeah.
Why did you select the Army?
You may be aware there was something called ASTP,
Yes.
Army Specialized Training Program, and you took a test while you were a senior in high school, and I took that test, and you could have selected the Army or the Navy. I'm not sure why I selected the Army. It would have been much wiser to have selected the Navy, as it turned out.
Okay, why don't you start with your basic training and where you went, what kind of training you had?
All right, the first thing was in the ASTP, you went to school. I joined before I was 18, and you were in Army Specialized Training Program Reserve, and we went to Syracuse University for 3 months, but there was no room for us at Syracuse, so they sent us to Auburn, New York. And they took over a theological seminary, and I spent 3 months there in school, more or less, studying pre-engineering. And at the end of that time, we were supposed to go to basic training. At the end of basic training, we were going to go back to college. So when the ASTP term was over, they shipped us all to Fort Benning, Georgia, at the infantry school in the Sand Hill area, as I remember. Where we took infantry basic training. When I got there, I had very small feet because I'm a small person, and they didn't have any shoes for me. I wore a 5.5 Triple E Army boot, and they didn't have such a thing. So for the first 6 or 7 weeks, I wore my own shoes, and then about the 11th or 10th, I don't know, sometime in there, they dumped 5 pairs of shoes on me. At the end of basic training, we were supposed to go either to Brooklyn College or NYU. The orders had been cut. But in the 10th week, they ended the AST program almost completely. And we were told we were going to be reassigned. So we got on a train, and they took us someplace, and they put us in a room not dissimilar from this, with a bunch of guys sitting at a desk. And they said, "Okay, soldier, what do you want to do?" And I was a bit of an idiot, and I said, "Oh, I'd like to get into the glider troops." And the guy looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, no, you don't understand. He said, you're in the 87th Division, and you can have a rifle company or a machine gun company. I said, well, that's one hell of a reassignment, but okay, I'll take a rifle company because machine guns are heavier. So I got put into a rifle company, and the first thing they did was to give me the BAR, which, you remember a rifle is about 10 pounds, a BAR is 21 pounds. And when I carried it, and it rained, you had to turn it upside down because it had a large muzzle. So if I turned it upside down, it dragged on the ground because it was too long. And so I tried like hell to get rid of it, but I couldn't get rid of it. We were out on the range firing, and I was trying not to do too well. And they came over, they had a regimental list of I was third in the regiment, trying to do lousy. So I decided the last 100 points I wouldn't hit the target at all. So I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger, and my sergeant's standing right there, and he said, "Brenner, you'll never get rid of the BAR like that." But and I did. What happened was they finally made me assistant squad leader, buck sergeant, and so I didn't have to carry the BAR anymore. And while we had the BAR, the bores were pitted. So they used to make us go into the orderly room at night with steel wool and wire brushes and try to get the pits out of the bore, which of course can't be done. It's, once the holes are in the bore, you have to widen the bore, and you just can't do it. Okay, so I was in the 87th Division, and eventually became buck sergeant, assistant squad leader. And we went over, we did, you know, had infantry basic all over again. We had a captain who we all hated because he put us through bayonet drill on a regular basis, and it was a bitch. We were in Georgia, it was hot as hell, and we were doing bayonet drill, you know, running at these straw covered things and sticking bayonets in it. Guys fell out all over the place. I never fell out. I never fell out of anything. Eventually we went overseas in October of '43. And we went to England. I went on the Queen Elizabeth. And great big ship with, I don't remember, thousands and thousands of troops. And I was in a room for two with 11 other guys. And I got seasick. And every day they had muster, and you were supposed to get up out of your bunk and get on the deck for muster. And I just wouldn't go one day. I just was so sick. So the Colonel Moran, who was the battalion commander, had to go through everything and see that everybody got out, and I wouldn't get out. So he looked at me and he said, "Oh, fuck you, lay there and die." That's what happened. Anyhow, we got to Scotland, and we spent in Greenock, Scotland. And from there we went to Leek, England, where we stayed for about 5 weeks. We did some training there. And then we went, I guess, to Southampton, and we crossed the Channel, landed at Le Havre, you know, about months after D-Day. But Le Havre was a mess. We could see all the damage that had been done. And we camped out in an apple orchard for a while. And then the first action we saw was in Metz. I don't remember exactly how we got there, by train or by truck, but we were in Metz a week or two before Metz fell. And we were in, my division, my company was in on the taking of the last fort. There was a Fort Durand, and I was in that fort, and the Germans surrendered. That was the end of that. And then we were taken someplace in the Saar Valley, and we spent a few weeks in the Saar Valley in battle, in combat. And the very first thing that happened to me, you know, there's a sort of a line, and you're on this side of the line, you're not in combat, and this side of the line, you are in combat. As I stepped over that line, there was an 88 up on the tanks with the 88s, and they were firing at us, and a shell hit near me, blew me up into the air, and I came down, and I fell, and I wasn't hurt, which was just incredible. One of our sergeants, who I disliked intensely, because he didn't, not in my platoon, he was in another platoon, but he was a bastard. He decided, you know, in the fields in France, there were crosses all over the place. And I never found out why they were put exactly where they were, but they were there. So he decided that he was going to take refuge behind a cross. And we told him, don't do it. They probably have it zeroed in, and it's a bad place to be. And I'll never forget, he said, "Oh, they can't kill me." So he got down by the cross, and boom, a shell came right in there on the cross, and he was gone. So from there, the Bulge began. And we were in Saar Valley, and General Patton said he would bring up 3 divisions into the Bulge. And they put us on these trucks, a whole platoon on one of these enormous trucks. It was rainy and cold, and it was absolutely miserable. And they drove us up into I guess it was Belgium. And they dumped us off the trucks, and they said, dig in here. Well, the ground was like rock. It was frozen. You couldn't dig in. So I spent the next, well, till the Bulge was over. I went all through the Bulge. I was outside of Bastogne. I was in St. Vith, and Houffalize, and all these places. Went on patrol. Went on patrol one night because, of course, our idiot captain wanted us to go up to a cannon and put a phosphorus grenade in this cannon. And we had on these white suits, and I was, one of us, carrying a phosphorus grenade to put into this cannon so it wouldn't be able to use. And we knew it was crazy, and it couldn't be done. So anyhow, we went out, and we're crawling up this snow-covered hill, and the Germans were in some bushes, and they began to fire ball ammunition high and tracer ammunition low. So No, is that right? No, tracer ammunition high. That would apply tracer ammunition high and ball ammunition low. So you would think that you could sort of be up, but we knew better. So I was buried in the snow, and I went, all of a sudden I heard a whoo, and a bullet put a crease right in my helmet. So we turned around and went back and gave the good captain back his phosphorus grenade. And fortunately, no one was hurt doing that.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How well were you equipped for the winter fighting?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I know I've read a lot of stuff about guys who just were not in good, didn't have the equipment. We were pretty well equipped.
Did you have the combat boots?
Yeah.
Because I know some others told
Yeah.
us lately just
Yeah.
had low cuts.
No, we had combat boots by that time. We started out with shoe packs.
Were you wearing an overcoat or?
Yeah, had an overcoat.
Now
Yeah.
you had a white cover?
Well, when we would go out into the snow like that on a patrol or something, we had these white, looked like Ku Klux Klan guys, to blend in with the snow.
Yeah, because some of the other units we talked about, they said the Germans did, but they didn't.
Yeah, we had them.
Huh.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I saw the Germans with them, but we didn't do them all the time. But when on patrol or something like that, that's when you put the capes on. So anyhow, I spent all that time during the Bulge. We lost a lot of guys. I was a staff sergeant by then. I was a platoon, squad leader. And Colton, this fellow Colton, had been our platoon sergeant. And Captain Dorr one day, a few days into the Bulge, said to John, "My back hurts. I've got to leave. I can't go on." So John and I carried him out of the forest, and we never saw him again. And I think my respect for him went even lower than ever was before. And John saw him later on. John was wounded, and he saw him later on standing at a bar, perfectly okay. Anyhow, so we went through the Bulge, and the weather was unbelievable, as you know, and we had sleeping bags, mummy sleeping bags, and when you put them down, you try to dig a slit trench, push the snow away, and try to dig a slit trench, and you put your sleeping bag in the slit trench, and your body warmth would cause some of the land to melt. But then it got colder and it would freeze. And so when you got up in the morning and you try to get your sleeping bag out of the place, you couldn't get it out. You needed a trench knife to get your sleeping bag out of the thing. Anyhow, we went from there into the Siegfried Line, and we had a couple of terrible days. The 4th platoon one night, the 4th platoon and the 3rd platoon were decimated. We had an infantry tank attack. And the Germans could always hear the tanks. They knew how to, so if they zeroed in on the tanks and they missed, they hit the infantry. And this time, the 4th platoon got decimated. Our cooks, the cooks were really good guys. And when they could, they would bring hot food up to the front. They had these thermos cans, and every once in a while they would be able to do that. And this particular night, oh shit. Excuse me. So many guys have been lost during that day that there was so much food. I mean, you had seconds and thirds because we had lost all these guys. And I decided that I was going to go home, that I had enough. Oh, shit. I sat down next to a tree, and I said, I'm going to get trench foot, and they're going to have to send me home. So I took off my boots, I took off my socks, and I let my feet out, and it got cold, and it was just awful. So I rubbed my feet, put my shoes and socks back on, and said, I can't do this, I'm going to stay here as long as I stay here. I think one of the most difficult things to do, because when you're a squad leader, you're really the only guy that says to somebody, you go do that. Everybody else has numbers. 87th Division, you know, this 2nd Platoon, 1st Squad, but it only comes down to you, the squad leader, to say, you go and do that, lay there, do this. And so sometimes when you did that, guys didn't come back, or guys would come back wounded. And I think of all the things that I went through and did, I think that's the most difficult to think about and to remember. Yeah. Anyhow, we walked across Germany, took thousands of prisoners, maybe not thousands, but many. We crossed the Rhine. We had a new lieutenant. Colton got hurt in Koblenz. Is it Koblenz? Yeah, Colton got shot in the leg in Koblenz, and we got a new lieutenant. His name was Lieutenant Patton. And you may remember they called General Patton Blood and Guts. So we used to call him Piss and Shit, which was unfair because he was really turned out to be a nice guy, but how could you not, you know? He had no combat experience. He was a 6-day wonder. And the night we crossed the Rhine, during the afternoon, they took the non-coms, and they took us, we had about 10 miles back from the river, and they took the non-coms to show us where we would have to cross that night. And when I saw that, I don't want to do this. I mean, none of us. It was not a thing to do. So anyhow, we went back, and that night we had to walk. They had driven us up in the daytime, but that night we had to walk up there. And the engineers had set small boats on the edge of the river so we could get in the boats and paddle across. And in my boat, I was up on the upper left, and Lieutenant was back here on the right. There were 10 of us in the boat, and we started to paddle, and I can see that we were going down the river. And I turned around, and Lieutenant Patton was sitting there, not moving. I said, "Fuck it, Lieutenant, row the boat!" Oh! And off we went. And so we got to the other side. And then he says to me, "All right, Brenner, take your squad down the road and check it out." So that's what I did. And as I was, and then the Germans, the other side of the Rhine is vineyards. It goes straight up, sort of, and they have these vineyards. And I was the leader. So I'm going down the road, and the Germans would dug in every 15 or 20 feet, and I'd come up to the hole. I had a machine pistol at the time, and I'd come up to the hole, come and see out with the hand on the cup, and they would surrender. As we got to the town, obviously an SS guy was coming out to inspect the guard. So I dropped on my knee behind a tree, and I pointed. He didn't see me, and I pointed the thing. He was quite a distance away, and I yelled at him, "Come and see hand," with the hand on the cup, and he wasn't having any of it. So he heard my voice, and he started fire at me with a machine pistol, and I fired at him. And I hear one of the guys down on the road, "They cut Brenner in half, they cut Brenner in half." I said, "No, no, no, I'm still here, he's down." And I had hit him in the leg with a 45. You get hit with a 45, you just fall down, you know, no matter where you get hit. So when we went over to see what he was doing, he had fallen on his face, and I reached down to see what he was doing, if he was alive, if he had being with him. And what he did was, he lay down on his face, and he threw the machine pistol about 1.5 feet in front of him and played dead. So if we had just left him there, he would have picked up that machine pistol and we would have been in trouble. Fortunately, that didn't happen. We realized he wasn't dead, and we picked him up and sent him back as a prisoner. And then we were cleaning out the town, and I went, oh yeah, we opened up the basement of a house, and in the basement in the house were all these citizens of this small village. And when the door opened up and they saw people with guns, they were frightened to death. And then they said it was Americans. "Oh, thank God, thanks God, Americans, Americans, thank God, Americans." And they were pleased to see us, even though, because, you know, what they had been gone through. The next one I went down, and there were 3 German soldiers. They had rifles, and they were pointing at the door, and I came in with a machine pistol, and they decided to surrender. So I brought them up out of the basement, And when we captured prisoners, we would destroy their rifles so they couldn't be used again. We'd take the bolt out, throw the bolt away, and crack the stock. So I cracked 2 of the stock against a tree. I took the rifle, smashed them up against the tree, and the stock flew up. The other one wouldn't break. There was a big concrete block. So I took the rifle and I smashed it down, and the butt of the rifle came up and hit me in the mouth and knocked my teeth out. I lost 4 teeth up here. So I went through the rest of that day. At first I didn't even know what happened. Then I put my tongue there and I was bleeding and the teeth were gone. But I went through the rest of that day doing whatever, climbing the, anyhow, at night they sent me back to an aid station across the Rhine, and they pulled out the roots of my teeth. And they sent me the next morning, I was going to stay there. And the next morning they sent me back up online. And then I said, I want to get a Purple Heart. Oh, you don't get a Purple Heart for that. It's a self-inflicted wound. We're going to get court-martialed. So I said, all right, to hell with it. I'm not getting it. Well, since then, over the years, I have tried to get a Purple Heart for this. And no matter what I do, I get turned down. I've written to Senator Moynihan years ago, and they're no help. They're just no help. All they do is forward your letter to somebody, which I could do myself. I tried Senator Schumer recently, same thing. The Army refuses to give me a Purple Heart. They claim it's line of duty, not due to combat. So they don't want to give me Purple Heart. Okay, so there, the next day I'm crawling up this vineyard place and a whole bunch of Germans in a machine gun nest, with 3 of them. And I guess they didn't see me, but I had a hand grenade, and I threw the hand grenade into this and killed 2 of them and wounded the other one. When that happens, it's okay. But when you think about it later, like now, you kill people, you know, and that's, even though you had no choice, and that's what war is about, and at the time you just did it. Now, when I think about having killed those guys and a couple of others, it's not something human beings are supposed to be doing. Anyhow, after April, things got somewhat quieter. There wasn't much. We took a lot of prisoners, but there wasn't all that devastating armor again. You know, all the shelling that we did. We got strafed twice, but fortunately I didn't get hurt. Oh yeah, we liberated a whole bunch of slave laborers, and they were on this airfield. There were thousands of them living on this airfield, and somehow or other I got to be sergeant of the guard for about 3 days on this airfield. And they didn't have a bathroom, and they had a railroad trestle. So what they would do is they'd climb to the railroad trestle, back over the railroad trestle, and do their business on the railroad trestle. So we had them build a great big latrine. And they began to use the latrine, but frequently there were too many online, and the women would simply spread their legs and urinate. These people had been treated so horribly by the Germans that they were like animals.
What nationality were they?
Polish, Russian, others. It was terrible, just terrible. One day, there's a big fight going on, and so we broke up the fight and we tried to find out why they fought. And somebody was able to translate. They were beating up this guy because he had been an overseer. And one day a woman came in and said to him, "I can't work today because my hands hurt. I can't work." So he said, he was sitting at a desk apparently like you. He said, "Well, put your hand down and let me see." So she put her hand down and he took a knife and he stabbed her through the hand and he said, "Now you can't work." At least that's what these people told us. And that's why they were getting even with him. They were beating him up because he had done that. People do terrible things. We released a couple of Italians who had been taken prisoner, young guys, sometime in April. And the Germans at that time were in retreat. What they would do, they would cut down trees across the road so that the tanks would have a lot of trouble and the guys would have to go around them. And the Hitler Youth would dig in behind the trees and they wouldn't give up. They just wouldn't give up. And so either the tanks blew them out or we blew them out. It was crazy. So anyhow, these two Italian guys were in the woods and they saw some Germans chopping down a tree. And they took the butt of the rifles and they killed them with the butt of the rifle. They got rifles and they killed these guys who were cutting down the trees. And they killed them with the butt of a rifle, smashed their heads in. I mean, there's so many things like that. On a tank attack post, we had infantry tank attacks, and they would put some of us on a tank. And I had half my squad on a tank one day, and they stopped for a minute near a railroad. And it was a smaller tank, and these two guys, the driver and the lieutenant, opened up their turrets and stuck their heads out. Now, I was sitting right like this, and these two guys are by here, and a sniper picked them both off. I got off that tank, and I said, I'm not riding a tank again. It's the last time I ride a tank, and I wouldn't get on a tank after that. These two guys we got one through the ear, and I think it was the same bullet. He got the second guy. Well, I mean, you can go on and on with stories like that, unfortunately. Toward the end of the war, this other one. My closest buddy was a guy named Roland Gilman, and every time there was a battle, the first thing we would do after the battle is go look for each other to see if we were still alive. Unfortunately, we both made it through the war. And one day, he and I were doing something, and there was a sniper up in a building shooting at us. And it was a German small cannon, like a 57 millimeter. So he and I turned this thing around, and we put the German shells in it, and we were shooting at the house. And it turned out that the shells were, I forget what you call them, but they didn't explode going through the house. I forget there's a certain kind of, I guess they had to hit a tank.
Oh, armor piercing.
Armor piercing, right, that's it. So they went right through the house. But the sniper got frightened, and he came out with his hands up. And I went over to him, and I had a machine pistol, and had a little cover on it. And I put the machine pistol in his gut, and I wanted to kill him, because he was shooting at me. I mean, he wasn't shooting at random, he was shooting at me. And I really wanted to kill him, and I just couldn't do it. I just, and I don't regret not doing it. Only partially. But, I just couldn't do it. And it would have been wrong. It was wrong. We used to have these arguments about killing prisoners. And I insisted, after Lieutenant Burke, our lieutenant, got killed in the Bulge, we captured a whole bunch of Germans who had killed Lieutenant Burke. And the guys wanted to kill them. And I said, you can't do that. First place, it's wrong. In the second place, it's bad for us. Because if the word gets out that the 87th Division is killing prisoners, they're not going to surrender. And they'll kill more of us. So it's to our benefit to take the prisoners and live. I managed to prevail. We didn't kill prisoners. At least that I know of. I guess toward the end of the war, we were just on the border between Germany and Czechoslovakia. And on May 7th, we heard that we were going to make an attack into Czechoslovakia the next day, but we also heard that the war was going to be over the next day. So nobody wanted to do anything. I mean, we got up and we had these little radios, and we said, well, the war's going to be over. Can we just not do anything? No, you have to go ahead. Just continue. But nobody wanted to move, so we took these little tiny steps, and finally they told us, okay, the war's over. And you could stop. So we were in Germany just for a brief time after that. We did guard duty in a small village for a few weeks. Then we came back to the States, in preparation of going to Japan. We were the 4th Division to come back to the United States. And we had a 30-day furlough, and we went back to Fort Benning, Georgia, and we were supposed to be on our way to the Pacific when they dropped the bomb. So I've never had any qualms about whether it was the right thing to do or not. And I've also seen recently, there's an 87th Division Association. They have a reunion every year. And I've gone to the last 2 or 3 because I go with John, and I get to see him that way. Anyhow, somebody in the division obtained, through the Freedom of Information Act, they obtained the detailed plannings for the invasion of Japan. And it would have been a slaughter on both sides. The Japanese apparently had put aside a lot of kamikaze pilots, and they were prepared to sink the American troop ships as they approached Japan. And there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers to make the invasion, of which we would have been part of it. So I was very glad that that didn't happen. And I was discharged. I had 65 points. You remember you were discharged by points? I had 65 points, and I had to wait at Fort Dix for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks so my points were right. And I worked they put me in a clerk's office filing something, so I used to go home. My mother lived in Brooklyn. I would go home. And one day some captain got hold of me, and he was pissed because he couldn't find where I was. And he said, if you didn't have the combat you did, I'd court-martial your ass immediately. But he didn't. And finally I was discharged and went back to school.
Were you ever aware of the existence of the concentration camps?
Oh yeah, I personally didn't do it, but other guys in the outfit released liberated Ordorf. And yeah, I knew at the time, yeah. I saw, I don't know which one it was, but I saw one of the concentration camps after the people were taken out, and I saw the ovens and that kind of business. Yeah, I did see that. I don't know which one it was. Yeah.
How do you think the war made a difference or affected your life?
For the last 2.5, 3 years, I've been seeing a counselor at the vet center in Babylon because I'm very troubled. I live in a house in North Massapequa, and the back of my house is all wooded. There are no houses in the back. These are big woods. And in the wintertime, when it snows, I know where the German machine guns are. It isn't that I think that they're there. I know where they are. I know where the German machine guns are. For the most part, when I first got out of the Army, I think I went back to being a kid. I was 20 years old. I wasn't 21 yet. And I think I went back to college, and I got married a few years later and had 3 children. And I think I was kind of too busy to think about those other things. But in the last, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years, I've thought a great deal about it. And it troubles me. A lot of it troubles me. The Army, I applied for a pension and compensation for post-traumatic stress disorder about 6 years ago. And I've been seeing this counselor at the vet center. And finally, they agreed to give me a pension dating back to 1999. So I'm appealing it because I think it should go back to 1996. I don't go to war movies.
Did you ever read books about World War II? Or?
Sometimes, yeah. I don't do much of that. One of my buddies, a local guy I went to high school with, recently gave me, you know, the book Citizen Soldier, and he gave me that book. So I read most of that. As a matter of fact, I wrote Ambrose a letter because I thought he treated the 87th Division improperly, but I never got an answer. I think I led a fairly normal life, although when I was 50, I'm not sure about this. When I was 50, I was seriously depressed, and I was hospitalized for a while. I never thought that my military experience had anything to do with that at the time, and I was seeing a psychiatrist. But later on, having seen John for a couple of years now, I'm sure that depression had something to do with my military experience and all the killing. I was, out of a platoon of 42 guys, only 7 of us survived the war. Gilman and half a dozen other guys. The only ones of the originals to come back. And so,
I'm sorry, you stayed in contact with some of the
oh yeah,
those you served?
yeah.
Do you ever talk these things over with them?
Yeah, with John Colton, because he's the one I see now.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a wonderful man. He's really a wonderful man. I love him. I really do.
Do you belong to any veterans organizations?
That's because I was seeing John. I never took part in any. Well, no. Right after the war, 3 or 4 of us joined the Jewish war veterans, and they were calling everybody comrades. So we didn't want to be called comrades, so we quit. About 3 or 4 years ago, I thought it would be a good idea if I would walk in the Memorial Day parade. So I live in Farmingdale, near Farmingdale, and I went to the parade one day, and I said to the guys, "Do you want me to quit?"
No, he's just telling me how much time is left on the tape.
Okay. I decided I would walk with them, and then when I walked with them, I said, well, I really ought to join. So I asked for an application. The application says something like, I hereby affirm my belief in God, and something else about God. So I said to the guy, what the hell does God have to do with my joining a veterans organization? He said, well, people believe in God, and they pray, and I don't think that's anybody's business, whether I do that or not. So I never joined. But I would have joined the VFW at that point, but I didn't because of that. But I walked with them. The last 3 or 4 years, I marched down Main Street in Farmingdale with my own little cap.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think okay.